Sponsored by Squarespace.
In 2022, a man published a letter from a mental health ward in Estonia's capital. The contents of that letter rocked the games industry, and it's only now that we're seeing the lasting impact. What I've got for you today is major updates to one of 2023's wildest stories, the utter implosion and strife that followed the collapse of Disco Elysium's team. It is so insane that there are now 5 different splinter groups, and I think what teased this up better than anything is a quote from Warren Spector, the creator of Thief and Deus Ex. There's a tendency among the press to attribute the creation of a game to a single person. And that very much does apply here. This is a story of people. Disco Elysium is one of the best games ever made, but now the people who made it have fractured between 5 different studios. It's wild and a story that only makes sense if you understand the rather unconventional beginnings of this game. Robert Kurvitz was born to 2 artists in 1984. He would end up following in their footsteps. As a teen, he dropped out of school. He focused on ideas, writing, arts. He hung around with his anarchist-leaning friends. They called themselves the Overcoats. And by early 2000, this group morphed into ZAUM, a cultural association. Basically, a loose band of creatives. People did music, they did writing, and lots of homebrew pen and paper RPGs. Many of those in the collective would go on to work in disco, most notably Robert Kurvitz as lead writer, Alexander Rostov as art director, and Helen Hindper, who would do a lot of writing and then lead writing on the final cut. But by the early 2000s, none of that had happened yet, though their years of pen and paper RPG sessions had built the world and the game. 2013 is when things kick into gear. Robert gets help from a supporter and friend, Carr Kender, to publish a book. Now, Carr is his own story, but for today's purposes, he's an investor and an author. That means he's a money man, but he is one that's actually interested in creativity. Now, this book, which is set in the world that soon would be known for Disco Elysium, unfortunately for both of them, sold under 1,000 copies. It was a complete failure, but Carr basically believed in a degree in Robert, and he pushed Robert to try again, but to do so in the form of a video game, one called No Truce with the Furies, though that's a game that we would soon know by a pretty different name. This game would be made by the collective, and to make it they needed money. That money came in the form of Carr Kender, investment from an Estonian media magnate, and then input from 2 businessmen who will become very relevant soon. Their names are Tonas Havel and Ilmar Kompas. They joined as managers. Time would go on, a majority of the developers end up moving to England, and by 2018, the game has been renamed to Disco Elysium, and after delays, it ships in 2019. It's an absolute moment of triumph, massive for the industry, but also a harbinger of a hell of a lot of pain for those involved. And pain is the sort of thing that you can avoid if your tech stack is today's sponsor. They won't just help you, you'll also have fun building. That's because Squarespace is the best place to build your website, and their Blueprint AI is the best way to start. It basically walks you through questions, and it helps you build a personalized site. They're pro designers, of course, so they ensure that you're getting all the font and the color choices that look great, are cohesive, so that even with no design experience, you can build something that looks designed, that is terrific. And then, adding your content, fine-tuning your site is super simple with their block-based editor and their Fluid Engine feature that even lets you tweak the little minute details while still having it look good and work on all the different platforms. And then with the basics done, you can cook. They've got native video support now, which looks way more clean and professional, and then loads of tools for your business. That means if you want to sell your physical products or your digital products, you can do that. The same goes for services, and even for the likes of courses, they've actually now got a full bespoke system for that. And for all of these things, you can use Squarespace payments, and that makes the money side real simple for you as the business owner, also for your customers. They also get more options like ACH Direct Debit if in the US, Afterpay in the US and Canada, Apple Pay, and of course in the UK, ClearPay, which is super useful for your customers. So what you can do is build your site today with a free trial at squarespace.com/Bellular News, and then that code, that link, gets you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. It's October 2019. Disco is an immediate hit. It has deeply textured writing, art that pushes the genre forward, and its gameplay systems are deeply resonant. It just wins. ZAUM saw revenues eclipse their development budget on day one. All was on the up, and they channeled that into 2021's final cut, which added complete voice acting to the game and even more content. But beneath the surface, not all would be well. There's a quote that I keep on having to come back to. As Biggie Smalls said, more money, more problems. This is definitely one of those situations. Here's how it went down. Audiences are ravenously hungry for more in this world, and we all live in a world often defined by the phrase, why can we not have nice things? But in that world, here stood the future of role-playing games. One letter, sent from a mental health facility, shattered that. The dissolution of the ZAUM Cultural Association post was made. It's emboldened and in all caps, and it's by Martin Lugier. It's the first time he's appeared in this story, but he was actually there from the beginning. He was a founding member of the ZAUM Cultural Association, and he was a person who assembled much of the core team. The message of this document is clear, and its contents are revealing. ZAUM, the Cultural Association, is dead. He's killing it. But ZAUM, the limited company in England, well, that still exists. We also learned that key founding creatives Robert Kurvitz, Helen Hindper, and Alexander Rostov, plus the post's author, were all ousted from that company. Martin explains that ZAUM no longer fits its founding ethos, and he signs off with his name, followed by Tallinn Inpatient Treatment Center of Psychiatric Clinic, Ward 9. And that's something that stands out to me, perhaps a signal to the world of just how much stress this break inflicted on the man. So, Kurvitz, Hindper, and Rostov then alleged that their opponents at ZAUM, the company, engaged in corporate malfeasance and fraud. ZAUM then responds by countering them. They accuse Kurvitz and Rostov of IP theft and abusive behavior, and then GI.biz partially corroborated the latter from a staff perspective. Shortly after then, Carr Kender, the businessman and writer who helped kick this whole thing off, well, he then went and sued ZAUM. And the allegation is pretty wild. It's that Ilmar Compass purchased a story draft and concept art for a Disco sequel. Then he sold it back to the company for 4.8 million euro, and then he used that money to secure a controlling stake in the company. Certainly then, we see that this is messy. But then in 2023, a mammoth documentary dropped by People Make Games. It was 2.5 hours long, and it corroborated quite a few things. Former members of the collective and Disco staff all agreed that Kurvitz's work is exceptional, but that their leadership style compromised projects. On the flip side, though, going against the studio, it does corroborate the idea that the studio's new owners did allegedly scam Carr Kender, Robert Kurvitz, and other leaders, and then force them out. It's just one of those situations where nobody came out of it looking good, and the allegations of toxic management ended up drawing fury from some of the Disco audience. They essentially felt that in the documentary, a bit of an equivalence was drawn between Kurvitz's management flaws and then, well, the stealing of his life work by the company, as if one explained the other. I honestly think that PC Gamer's subtitle just captures the whole thing perfectly. They said, no one comes off well here except for the developers caught in the middle. What's interesting though is that Argo Tulik, an original ZAUM member who was a source for the documentary, did counter the backlash against the doc. He basically said that the release of that documentary was the one good thing that happened to ZAUM employees in 2023. And unfortunately for those employees, 2024 would not be kind. GLHF interviews confirmed that the company management cancelled a whole suite of projects, including a standalone Disco expansion that would be led by Argo Tulik, who of course was, at that time, the last ZAUM member left, and they also laid off a third of the company. The sources allege continuous crunch, cancellations, and management hostility that was often particularly targeted at women. And in his final words for the interview, Tulik made it clear that the fish rots from the head. Talent left, and with that, ZAUM basically degraded and degraded. Then, what happened is today, where we've learned about the successors. Within 24 hours, 3 successor companies would go public. One of them has a game, the other one has a pitch, and the other, a fairly interesting manifesto. Of the 3, Dark Math Games have the most to show, and they're the closest to the Disco formula with their game, XXX Night Shift. They've got a game, they have a Steam page, 10 people, and a trailer where a breathy voice actor appears to wake up somewhere they shouldn't. Now, they were the first company to start, founded in April 2023, and backed by familiar names. Carr Kender. He actually started as company director, but then he resigned from company director, but it now seems that he exerts control via a holding company while his brother serves as director of the actual company. So I very much have to imagine he does not want to be forced out again. He ended his legal battle in March 2023, and it seems he got this company going within a month of that. The next company's Longju. They've got about a dozen staff, some of whom worked on the cancelled Disco sequel, and they're making what they call a psychogeographic RPG, which is something I don't think any of us have heard about about before. They've got a narrative director from Bungie and Rocksteady, and we really don't know much, but they are backed by a tech investor who does not have prior games experience. All we've got to go on is this piece of rather gorgeous concept art and an explanation of what the hell a psychogeographic role-playing game even is. It's weird, I'll explain it in their words. Every decision reshapes the world and characters, and that experientially, the lines between the mind and environment blur, colliding and transforming with each choice. So basically, to me, it sounds like an RPG where what you do not only changes like the events of the game, stuff with characters, but also the layout and structure of the world, which certainly seems neat, but it's definitely very early. They were founded in September 2024. And then third, we've got Summer Eternal, who are a very interesting bunch. Very little's known, right? They are more of an incubation project. They're very early, but they've at least been willing to show some names. So there's loads of ex-ZAUM people. Argo Tulik, who I mentioned earlier, is there, as is the narrator of the Disco Final Cut. They're actually so early that they're not a legal entity yet. What they've got, though, is a fiery manifesto on the power of art over greed. They say artistically driven, creative-led, worker and player-owned, which actually is something that translates into reality. Here's their plan. A limited company in Croatia with 50% of the shares held by active internal devs in a co-op. 25% then by any external collaborators also in a co-op. 20% via an LLC, which basically will act as a vehicle for like publishing, receiving investment and that sort of thing. And then 5% by a non-profit that any purchasing player can opt into. And that latter bit certainly is an interesting idea. They're going about things in a very different way to Carkender, but certainly neither group wants to go anywhere near the sort of thing that they just escaped from. That's the three companies who all revealed their existence within 24 hours, but there are of course two more companies. First, there's ZAUM. They still exist. They've got no staff from the original collective, but of course they currently have the rights to Disco Elysium. They can do things in that world, and some of their team probably worked on it, but many seniors are gone, as evidenced by all of these other companies. Now, they've apparently got two games in progress. One is a disco spin-off that is potentially in mobile, and the other is an unrelated sci-fi role-playing game. And to put things rather bluntly, the fifth company is not their friend. It's called Red Info Limited, and it's actually owned by Curvitz. Rostov is also there, and for money, NetEase Games, and per the People Make Games documentary, they are funding it. Right now, we just don't know what they're working on, but I think it's noteworthy that Robert Curvitz is still challenging ZAUM over rights to the Disco IP, and certainly for the sake of video games, I would prefer the original people actually have that. I mean, obviously, it's not really the original people. There's lots of others, and they're all at other different companies. But given all that's happened, I don't trust ZAUM. So we've got then 4 successor companies plus the husk of the original company, not that I expect much from it. If Curvitz wins back the rights, then we could see a true successor from one of the people who is the most influential in crafting the disco world over years and years and years and years, stretching back to before it was a video game, even writing a full book. Till then, though, the other companies will be doing spiritual successors. And of course, even if not made by the people who led disco and established that world, the people who worked in a game of that quality, well, they know what good looks like. They've surely learned lessons, and whole beloved characters like Kuno were written by other people, not Curvitz, so there is great talent out there. It's one of those things to me where natural forest fires are destructive, but all of that ash and the minerals, they go into the soil and they nourish it, and future growth happens. Here, I think, something similar goes on. The lessons that have been learned are extremely painful, but assuming you scrape through, painful lessons are often the best kind because they actually stick. That is, of course, unless you've got no control over your future, like the poor sods over in the Overwatch 2 team. You can check out this video next.